All right, thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. This is the Wednesday, May 28th, 2025 meeting of the Somerville Community Preservation Committee. I'm Ryan Kirchhoff, the chair. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, this meeting of the Somerville Community Preservation Committee will be conducted via remote participation. We will have a video recording available upon request as soon as possible after the meeting. Roberta, could you please call the roll?
Yep. We have Mary Jo,
Here.
Heather Highmark,
Here.
Eric Parks,
Here.
Michael McNally,
Here.
Ryan Kirikoff,
Present.
and Joe Capuano.
Yeah.
And I heard from Carlos Ayala that he probably will not be able to join us this evening. We are also missing at the moment John Kent and David Turin.
Okay. I'm sorry, I have to step away for 20 seconds, but would you mind moving to the approval of the minutes and opening conversation, Roberta?
Sure. So the first item on the agenda is approval of minutes from April 23rd. Any comments on the minutes?
I have no corrections to make.
Thanks.
Neither do I.
I'd be happy to move to accept them if there's no edits. So I'll make the motion to accept the minutes.
Second.
All right. And I'll call the roll. Joe,
Here.
Ryan.
Oh, yes, I approve the minutes.
Okay, yes. Michael,
Aye.
Eric,
Yes.
Mary Jo,
Aye.
Heather,
Yes.
and Ryan.
I had no comments on the minutes, so assuming there were no further comments made, I vote yes.
Thank you. Minutes are approved.
Excellent. Thank you for doing that. Okay, the entirety of our agenda tonight is going to be dedicated to the plan update, reviewing our financial report, and then speaking about the budget for next year, which is exciting stuff. And Roberta's done a ton of legwork to get us to this point. You're going to see numbers related to an expanded CPA budget for the city this year, which is great and exciting, and also means there are some interesting decisions to be made for this group. So looking forward to the discussion. But first, Roberta, do you want to give a summary of the plan update?
Sure. So I included in the meeting packet the entire draft. You've seen the community needs section of and the community engagement sections of the plan last month. But I have put it all together and included in the entire plan update, the introductory material that explains to anyone not familiar with it what the Community Preservation Act is and how it works, and gave a financial background. Reviewing, I'm going to share my screen so that you're looking at the same thing that I'm looking at. All right, so reviewing the CPA revenue since the inception of the program. So we have seen the red represents the state match over time. The blue represents the city surcharge over time. This is all at the surcharge rate. And so next year, we're going to be seeing a much taller line emerge, showing surcharge rate. But this is the historical revenue over time. And then we look at what the historical spending has been over time. So figure 2 shows the spending since the inception of the program among the 3 program areas. And figure 2 includes the spending on bonded projects, which are listed in table 1. So we've spent to date 56% of CPA funding for affordable housing, 24% for historic preservation, and 20% for open space and recreation. Just in the last year, the funding distribution was spent 42% on affordable housing, 43% on open space and recreation, and 15% on historic preservation. And a caveat to note is that figure 3 does not include the debt service payments in each of the program areas. So in addition to what we spent in these program areas, there was also annual debt service payments. If something in the order of this shows what the FY26 debt service will be, but it was something close to this is what was added to what we spent in the for grants in these program categories. I've created a table that summarizes all of the activity in the last year. On the right are all of the projects that the CPC funded last year. And on the left is all the sources of revenue and the funds that were drawn from other sources. I know I always have the paragraph markers on when I'm writing, but I'll turn them off so you can see better. Then we've I've updated the estimate of funding that has been leveraged in each of the categories. Open space and recreation, for every dollar of CPA funds spent, we have facilitated projects worth $2.65 from other funding sources for every dollar of CPA funding in open space and recreation projects. Historic preservation has been matched approximately 1-to-1. Affordable housing support programs, these are homelessness prevention and housing stability, have been matched 83 cents to the dollar. And affordable housing construction has been matched $18 to every dollar of CPA funding. And I provided a couple of maps showing the locations. Actually, I think these are last year's maps. We might have added a couple of locations since last year, but this gives you a general snapshot of where the projects have been located across the city, how they're distributed by ward, and how they're distributed by environmental justice neighborhoods. The shaded areas on the map either have, I don't have the legend, do I, for environmental justice neighborhoods? There they are. The areas shaded on the map have a concentration of minority, low income, and non-English speaking residents. And so that brings us to the discussion for this evening, which is that we estimate that this year with the new surcharge, there will be $7.2 million of CPA revenue. And the big question for the committee to consider tonight is what should be the distribution between the program areas, the estimated revenue. And for this, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, maybe pause for a moment to let you ask any questions you have. And I will share the worksheet that we can use to calculate the distribution.
Heather, please.
So it was interesting to see that pie chart that showed open space at 43% for this year's grants. And because, we allocate like 50% to affordable housing and less. So is that because we moved money from undesignated funds into open space, thereby increasing its slice of the pie?
That is part of the reason. And also, it's a little bit unfair comparison because the debt service is taken out of the 50%, and it's not reflected in that pie chart. So if I were to add the debt service in, and that would have been a good number for me to generate for you today, and I didn't. What would it look like if I were to include debt service in the distribution for last year? I'm not certain what that is.
It was just really interesting because like what we're about to do is to allocate the slices of the pie and then to see how over the course of the year, how much that actually changed based on moving around on designated funds or giving emergency funds or whatever, that it was, there's the exercise of making this decision we're making tonight, but it doesn't, it's not set in stone, it's sort of, it can really flux over the course of the year.
Yeah. Michael?
Just to kind of add on to the initial questions about the debt service, shifting that percent a little bit, the debt service is going to be relatively fixed even as our budget more than doubles, right? So that percent flex is actually going to get much smaller in this next round. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mary Jo?
Quick question. So when the open space figure went beyond into like the 40%-ish, if I heard your explanation correctly, was that because of money being moved from the reserves? Is that what caught? Because it looked like its original portion of the pie was something like 23%, but last year it was 40 something percent. And I just wanted to better understand, was that an anomaly or a moment in time? And then we kind of, and there's a reason I'm asking, being newer to the committee, I worry that housing is extremely important. And of course, we want to see more production of housing, affordable housing, of course. But as we densify ourselves, there will be a newfound need for open space more than we can imagine. And so that's why I was worried, like 20% seemed low, and then all of a sudden it's 40, and I didn't know how to judge that.
Yeah. I am quickly trying to do the calculation that you're asking for to add the debt service into the pie chart so that I can answer the question of what does it really look like. So I'm almost there, and I will generate what the percentages are for you.
I think Roberta and I are both doing rapid math on the side here. Glad people are having the same questions and thoughts as we are. Anybody else?
Well,
Oh, go
I
ahead.
don't think there's a big bond initiative that involves open space. There is in preservation and there is in housing, but I don't think there's any huge bond out there on any of the open space projects. Partly because, there was ARPA funding, there was other funds that could be leveraged. But I think I'll take a stab at that, in that I think that we sort of, some years we don't get as much open space grant applications as others, and we get like a lot in historic preservation and not enough to use all the open space budget. So it doesn't always, sometimes it's grant driven by, what are the asks and how does the final sort of grant pie look like. And then it sounds like here we've got the bond issue sort of distorting it, as well as moving money out of undesignated to cover giving more grants than we actually have in the purse for that particular cycle.
Yeah. We do try to balance that pulling money out of the undesignated by making the correction every year to add some to the Affordable Housing Trust. So we try to keep the Affordable Housing Trust at 50% while allowing the other two program areas to be funded directly out of the undesignated fund balance. So I have put on the screen, I ran the numbers with the debt service included. So we're at 48% affordable housing, 36% open space, and 15% historic preservation, which is remarkably similar to what we have seen people ask for through the public engagement activities. So it's kind of interesting.
Noted. Helpful. Okay. Anybody else with comments or questions on this portion? I think it'd be interesting to pivot into the budget view that I think you were going to show next. Maybe this is, oh, you already have it above. So maybe we
Yeah.
can look at the table.
So I have on the table the surcharge revenue. We're estimating a $500,000 state match this year, given the estimate rate that the state has given us. So that leads us to 7,260,181 estimated tax revenues, estimated revenue for CPA in FY26. So what I have labeled as the proposed distribution column, the numbers that are in this column right now are the numbers that have been used in the last several years. And this is a number that you this evening have the discretion to decide what you want these numbers to be for this coming year. I would just add that the 5% admin is the maximum that's allowed under the legislation. Any unused administrative fees go back into the program area reserves, or goes back into the undesignated fund balance so that it can be used on eligible projects in future years. So that just
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I just wanted to say that setting aside the maximum admin budget just gives us flexibility in case things come up that we need to use admin for. But the money becomes available for projects if it's not spent.
Roberta, how did we do on admin last year? Did we spend that? Was it on mostly marketing and outreach events type stuff? What was the outlook for it?
I was just looking at this today and I didn't grab this number, but that's a really fair question as well. We had higher than usual printing costs this past year, and some design that we commissioned for the postcards and banners. So with all of those expenses, I think we still ended up with approximately $50,000 left over from last year's admin budget.
Okay. We're pretty close. It sounds like that. I mean, open to feedback from other folks on the committee, but I feel like the 5% remains appropriate based upon that. Okay. Anybody else with questions, reactions to what you're seeing right here? One thing I might ask, Roberta, the math that you did down below for the fiscal year 2025 spending, I think it could be just helpful in the view if we can pop those up to correspond to the rows, so we can see, even if we were to keep the allocation percentages the same next year, what's the absolute dollar increase that we're looking at for each of the programs. At least for me anyways, that'll help me kind of evaluate go, no go decisions on making any tweaks here. And while you're working on that, I guess kind of one of my leading questions, I'd love to hear from other folks too, is where are we seeing the scarcity? Where, especially on the affordable housing side, and we heard great testimony from folks at the annual meeting. But I'd be really curious to know, like, were they turning projects away? How competitive was their process in trying to unlock our dollars last year? They're already in a base assumption, if we don't change anything, they're going to be getting $1.5 million more out of this budget just by default, right? So I'd be curious to hear if you or anybody else on the committee knows kind of what the tone was at the Affordable Housing Trust last year. And I know they're presenting next month, which is unfortunate we can't hear them first.
Yeah, I did add to the meeting packet the Affordable Housing Trust annual report from last year. So you can get a flavor, and I can pull that up if you'd be interested in looking at that right now. You can use that to get a flavor of what the how the Affordable Housing Trust has been using the CPA funds. And I would also highlight that something that will be affecting all of the program areas is that many of the projects that we've funded in the last 2 years have been CPA supplementing budgets that were largely covered by ARPA funding. And now the ARPA funding is going away. And so I think particularly, well, I think this has been true in all of the program areas. Projects that have been able to move forward in the past year because of ARPA funds being available to cover the bulk of them are going to be more reliant on city funds. So examples of projects that have been ARPA funded have been affordable housing projects and the city hall roof and the elevator installation at the Somerville Hispanic Association and the Somerville Museum, climate control combined with the projects that the CPA funded, and many of our park projects, the Dilboy Auxiliary Fields, for example. And Henry Hansen, I think, benefited from ARPA funds. The um, the Brown School project. So many of the projects that we funded in the last couple of years have been reliant on a funding source that is going away.
It's a good note. Mary Jo, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I did. Roberta, can you just remind me, the budgeted reserve, what are the eligible uses of the budgeted reserve? And the reason I'm asking is with very changing costs of construction, could we anticipate overruns where a project of any of these categories might come to us needing more? Is that what the budgeted reserve is for, or is that not at all what it's for?
The budgeted reserve is flexible. It can be spent in any of the 3 program areas. So what typically happens is, the program area reserves for open space and historic resources are established minimums. That's a minimum level of funding that's going to go to that category. And depending on what applications we receive, the more of the budgeted reserve may go to one category or another. So in many years, but the historic preservation projects receive a lot of the budgeted reserve funds. But this past year, it was the open space projects that received more of the budgeted reserve funds.
Thanks, Mary Jo. Any other with comments, questions? Heather?
Well, I think anticipating the increased budget, one place to start might be knocking the budgeted reserve down a little bit from 10% and knocking the admin and operating down from 5%, because 5% at the current budget is always been ample and enough to cover it. So with the larger budget, I think that both those items could maybe go down, and that might give us just a few points to play with in terms of adjusting the program areas.
It's a good point.
One concern I had though, is might we be needing more admin than we've ever needed before? Because we'll almost have almost like a doubling of projects, perhaps. I don't know. Maybe the admin was always, like Roberta was saying, there was always more than enough, even with a little left over. But I just worry we'll be having so much more to work with. There'll be so many more projects. We may really see an uptick in our admin. I don't know.
I don't anticipate that we're going to double the amount of admin that we're using, quite honestly, but I do anticipate um the need for one or more projects that would use a consultant on an on-call basis, or to retain a consultant services to help with um a question that we need to address.
Mhm.
Yeah, along those lines, one of the things I heard during the city presentations around the community assets that we have that we need to mothball and protect, and in some cases potentially revitalize. One of the things that I think I learned was that we have very limited staff to support those new projects and new initiatives. Roberta, is it possible that this expansion of the admin pool, or the increase at least, could help supplement that a little bit? Could that be a use of this consulting service and things like that?
Potentially.
Okay. I mean, for what it's worth, as one member, I think that's something that I could see being a hurdle to us really supporting our city-owned assets. Is, it's one thing when we're doing historic preservation with a third-party owner who is motivated, has the bandwidth to actually like work through project management and all that stuff. One thing that I think could be hard for us to actually implement these funds on city-owned property is just having the staff. And so I know, just again, as one member, I would advocate for making sure that we've got the support infrastructure to get those types of programs going. Unless this collective group doesn't want to encourage that, and we would prefer to only have it be privately led.
Well, I think it's actually the historic preservation people that need more help because they're inexperienced with this whole process. And I just have the sense that they're probably the ones that you're helping the most intensely, Roberta. So I don't mean to, like knock it down so that it doesn't work. I just think that I was looking for a way to increase money to affordable housing while keeping, a hefty slice, a good amount of budget for all the other program areas. And so I was just looking for, like, could we shave down some of these other areas that would just give us a few more points that we could reassign to affordable housing or open space or undesignated. I will make a pitch for undesignated funds or the budgeted reserve. At one point, we had considered getting rid of it and just trying to like kind of assign all the monies, but it really has on year after year been a very useful tool to have in terms of adjusting to sort of the dynamics of that cycle. So it's been a good thing to have.
I kind of agree in a way. We're doubling, if we kept the percentages where they are now, we're basically doubling what's available to every category. And the two I wouldn't call them wild cards, but the open space and historic preservations, we don't know really how the demand is going to respond to that extra availability. I have the feeling that the city is going to say they'd love some of the historic preservation money to start doing what would otherwise be capital improvement stuff to help with that. So I, not knowing really how the chips are going to fall, I wonder if having a good hefty unbudgeted reserve kind of keeps us nimble that way, at least for the next year, so that we can respond to what might be bigger swings in some of our requests next year and just treat our base percentages as sort of like bare minimums as we've done in the past.
Go
Eric,
ahead, Mary Jo.
Eric said something that made me think. Remind me how hard or maybe impossible it is once we pick these percentages for them to be changed. In other words, the three major categories, once those percentages are picked, does it that those percentages are set for the fiscal year? And so maybe what he just said about the budgeted reserve allowing us to be more nimble, that resonated with me when, if we can't change these percentages once we've picked them.
It's a great comment. Roberta, you can correct me if I say this wrong. The way that I think about the split between open space, historic, and budgeted, to me, that is more a statement of our priorities, I guess. We have historically, Roberta, I believe, based upon where we are in the fiscal year, been able to reallocate funds from one category to another, depending upon what's in front of us. Said another way, we wouldn't turn away an open space proposal in March or April if that budget, if the open space budget couldn't afford it, but the historic resources line could. Is that fair, Roberta?
So once it's in the reserve, it has to be used for that purpose. It doesn't come out of that reserve. It stays in that reserve permanently.
Oh,
So
I'm wrong then. I thought we had done reallocations in final months of the year previously.
no, what we've done has been to draw money out of the budgeted reserve or the undesignated fund.
Okay.
And so those are both flexible funding sources.
And so even when money is returned, it goes back to the category from which it was awarded.
Yeah.
So once it's earmarked, that's why the undesignated is useful, because it's not earmarked versus all the earmarks stay there. But as you can see from this year, where open space ended up being 42% of the pie, or in the corrected, with a debt service 36, it does, what we're deciding here is going to kind of morph a little bit on its own organically over the grant cycle, because we're going to move things from undesignated, or there's going to be an emergency request that's going to come out of somewhere. So it's important, I think, to the idea that it's sort of like a statement of our intent, of our values, or kind of where we want it to be. But and it is in some ways rigid and in some ways flexible. So
So having confirmed that, I think Eric's comment, I think bears extra weight, the ability to pivot. So, I mean, just looking at it, they're 20, 15, and 10 respectively. Is there a world in which each one is 15%? Anybody with any reactions to that?
When you say each
not
one, you
affordable
mean
housing.
housing as well?
I think that has to stay.
That math don't
Yeah.
math, but the 15% for open space, for historic, and budgeted reserve.
Ah,
That already automatically updates.
I'm sort of an idiot with the budgeted reserve versus the undesignated funds. I thought I understood all this, but those are the same, aren't they?
Budgeted reserve is this year's revenue. Undesignated funds is this complicated puddle of money left over from prior years.
Okay,
I-
which we've been keeping it. I think we had a magic number of like $750,000. We didn't want to dip below that.
yeah,
That in the undesignated fund. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't remember anymore how many years I've been. Is this my third go around? I don't remember. I've never seen any of the categories not have enough to spend it on. So I see this pile of money sitting in there. It's like this mythical thing, wondering how it came to be. So I can picture a time when, gosh, there are not enough projects, so let's just save it. Be a nice problem to have.
Rhoda, I just want to know I think we're flipped on cells E12 and E13. Um, open space being the larger of the two numbers.
oh, you're right.
But speaking to Ryan, to your idea, I think understanding that we'll ultimately give money to who needs it. It's not like we're voting to stiff somebody. It's just that, as we've seen in last years, there've been one year, last year is very open space intensive. And I think the year before that, we were kind of rating it for a lot of historic preservation stuff, if I remember correctly. So it does kind of vacillate. It's just optically, what we're then saying is that we've suddenly devalued open space by 5%. Does the optics of that mean anything?
It's a fair comment.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going to jump in, is that like we've been funding, or 36% of our projects have been open space funded. And we're looking to lower that percentage. I feel like that optics wise might not look the best. I think there's like ways that we can probably reduce things in other regards. The other push that I do want to say is that like as we are funding more and more larger and more dense affordable housing in our areas, our open spaces do become that much more important to us and that much more used, and require that much more attention and funding. So as we fund affordable housing, I think that our open space should proportionally increase in that same regard to accommodate all of the people in Somerville that need to use our open spaces.
Thanks, John. What the piece that we're dancing around a little bit here is the actual affordable housing allocation, and looking at the dollar amounts. A $2.17 million allocation last year would be 3.6 million if we did not make a change, or 3 million after the debt service. But that allocation still would be 3.6 million out of our hands. How do folks feel about that number?
But I guess I was more willing to reduce the budgeted reserve because I get what we're saying about being nimble and stuff, but I'm not compelled to bring it all the way up to 15. I was trying to go down from 10, partly because I would like to do affordable housing at like 55, or at a larger than 50%, partly just responding to this, constant knocking at the, every time we talk to the public, the first thing they say is affordable, affordable, affordable. And I would like to keep open space at the current 20 or something. So that's why I was trying to kind of shave things around to try and actually increase affordable housing in particular.
And just to piggyback off that, like as as a member of the Public Space and Urban Forestry Department, I have to defend open space, but I will say that Ellen gave a very compelling presentation at our previous meeting that really swayed us to it is important to be funding this affordable housing, and there's a dire need for it. And the loss in ARPA funding is going to be a huge detriment to them. And I do think we should be funding them. And I'm concerned if we put that money in the budgeted reserve rather than just giving it to affordable housing, that it's going to cause more roadblocks and hurdles for that department to kind of progress with what they need to do and what they think is best for the community. But it's just my opinion.
Thanks, John. Yeah. Yeah, I guess something that I don't feel super well educated on, and I've just been skimming through the annual report from last year that Roberta put out for the Affordable Housing Trust. I mean, it looks to me like their sources of funds kind of careen wildly from year to year. They have one-off injections here and there, but it looks pretty inconsistent in terms of the amount of money that they have coming in the door, which to me means, especially as ARPA, as folks have mentioned, is going away, it is an opportunity for this budget to be a stopgap in some ways. And I guess part of what I didn't understand as much is like specific projects within the Affordable Housing Trust that our money is being spent on. And it looks like that. If anybody has the report open, page 7, it's table 4, shows projects that are specifically tied to the CPA funds. Looks like basically just the Affordable Housing Trust deploys our funds as they can, as they see fit, or as they need. So, it does look like there's plenty of ways for them to spend the money. I guess I was afraid of us allocating and then not having the applicants come in the door asking for the money, and it just sits there. But it does look like they have plenty of uses to put it towards. I don't know if anybody else is more educated about how the Affordable Housing Trust makes their decisions than I am. I'd be interested to hear. Roberta, did I summarize it more or less correctly?
I think so. I wanted to try to share some. Is there a page that would be helpful to share from the Housing Trust annual report?
Page 7 is what I was looking at.
Okay. Yeah. So this gives a snapshot of, sorry, I have my Zoom overlaying the screen, so I can't see what I'm showing you. So this gives a snapshot of projects that CPA has funded specifically. They have received funding from other sources for other projects that aren't listed, but these are the CPA funded projects.
And the 1.7, that's the sum of those two projects, that is basically exactly what the CPA put in that fiscal year, 1.62 million.
Yeah.
So in any case, it was helpful for me to see that we are just a piece, right? We don't have projects that are specifically coming for CPA. You are awarded from CPA. It's, they use us as they need to on projects where it makes sense.
Yeah.
I think it's a good line of thought, Ryan. I think kind of a follow-up question to that, we saw what would look like a really amazing return on investment with the affordable housing funds. I think, Roberta, you're saying it's $18 for every dollar we put in there. As the ARPA funds start to recede, do you think that number is going to swing in a material way? Are we still looking at multiples for every dollar that we're investing in this program?
So I think the affordable housing developments have a wide-ranging of sources of funding. So federal funding, state funding, private capital going into those projects. I think there are several programs that have been very ARPA dependent, that the housing division is looking for ways to be able to extend those programs for housing stabilization and homelessness prevention. So I think that's an area that an increase in housing spending from CPA, I think may be likely to contribute to being able to expand and extend those programs that are currently ARPA funded.
Okay, that's helpful. I mean, looking at the magnitude of the dollars, those housing programs were about $500,000, and we're talking about, you know, $900 to $1 million increase. So I think that's very appropriate, and you'd still have more expansion even for the programs that they're currently funding. So, you know, just for looking at fiscal responsibility and trying to amplify the dollars we're spending, like, this sounds like a great opportunity for us.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, I would say taking off my CPC hat and putting on my professional hat as an affordable housing developer, the costs are the same, whether ARPA's here or not. So the amount with developers are going to be scrambling to find funds wherever they can to help, you know, fill gaps on affordable housing developments. But the multiple is still going to be there in terms of the impact that the CPC funds can drive.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else with comments?
With that said,
oh, go ahead, man.
Sorry, Ryan. With that said, to round out my thoughts here, you know, I think I've really appreciated what a lot of this group has said. Just to kind of make sure I voice my one concern here is that I think Eric is right. I'm a little bit concerned that we don't know what people need in the coming year, especially as funding's shifting everywhere. So I still, you know, would advocate a little bit for either maintaining the budgeted reserve or maybe even expanding it a little bit. But you know, otherwise, I'm also supportive of the expansion of the housing reserve as well.
Okay, does anybody want to be the bold soul that proposes a potential percent breakdown or any ideas on that front, just to start a conversation?
We sort of had a shotgun blast of opinions about whether to go up or down, and at this point, maybe I'm leaning towards the status quo on the percentages, but because there are multiple good points in as to why we'd want to step a little bit more into affordable housing at the expense of budgeted reserves. What that would essentially do if we'd knock that down to 5% is leave the budgeted reserve where it is now in terms of dollar values. If it's doubled, but cut in half. So I don't know. I'm a little bit afraid that we're going to get whacked with something big and wish we had it higher. But on the flip side, the two open space and preservation categories are going to get doubled budgets as well. So in theory, that will help alleviate a lot of that stuff too. So I guess, no, I'm not going to be bold. That's just my thought.
Appreciate your honesty. So as I think about what Heather brought up on the admin percentage, and I understand there's the conversation about consultants, you know, consultant spend within that line item. Heather, do you know what what the dollar amount was last year for this? And the reason I ask is I'm curious to see if, just for kicks, if we put 2.5% in the column G for admin, the number that spits out, I'm curious how that would compare to what we actually spent last year.
I would have to do a quick bit of research to find that for you. I can probably find the number pretty easily.
Okay. I mean, I would guess just based on arithmetic that's probably something close to what we had allocated last year if our overall budget is doubled and we cut the percent share in half, I would guess that it was something like that, 180,000. But oh, I see it in your report, 171,000.
There you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that in the Heather train of thought, that's 2.5% that in theory we could cleave off and give to affordable housing or somewhere else. But
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm just nervous that we may be selling ourselves short on admin as the either the quantity or the complexity of the projects could be ticking up. 2.5% on admin just I guess like you said, if we're doubling and then you cut it back to 2.5, then it's almost like sort of the same as it is right now. But what
Yep.
if the projects in number or size really warrant
yeah,
more consulting or staff time or whatever? I just worry about
yeah,
that.
that's fair. So where would you land on that? What would you do?
I've gone back and forth just listening to everyone's excellent points. I'm of the mindset to level fund the same percentage on open spaces before because of what John said, which would be 20. But then, if we left admin at 5, I know that's very high. With the doubling, then the reserve would have to go down to 5, which that has a downside. But we did increase affordable housing to 55%, which is more than it had been, plus the increased amount being used. I don't know if that's perfect. There's a lot of, I just, I love the thought of us having flexibility by having a bigger budgeted reserve, and maybe that's has to be let go, and maybe we can't grow the budgeted reserve that way and have all these other things happen.
We also have the carryover on designated funds.
I have a
That's
clarifying question for you, Roberta. So the admin and
Gives us
operating-
flexibility. So it's not, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Heather,
sorry.
you
Go-
you
go.
you were you blanked out for a moment, so we didn't hear all of what you just said.
Oh, my bad reception in this office. I was just saying that it's not the only place where we have flexible funds. That we have the carryover on designated funds.
It's a good point. It is a good point. John, go ahead.
So a clarifying question from Roberta. So the admin and operating expenses, that is pretty much for your personal salary and then any operating costs that the CPA needs, signage, community outreach, anything involved. Within the next year, do you see the need for a second staff person or increased staff time that we would need to keep this 5%? Or could we lower it to something like 4 or 3.5? I think 2.5 might be a little too low. Just allowing you to continue that good outreach, all the signage that you put in all of our parks and whatnot. Do you think that's sustainable for you this year?
Yeah, it is within the realm of possibility that we could add staff time out of this admin budget and consultant costs,
Yeah.
which could use some of the budget, but we could play around with numbers that would allow us to still have allow us to grow a little bit, and to to grow the admin a little bit, but to still have like not by doubling it, by something less than doubling it.
Yeah.
A question also, if there's some unforeseen reason that you need more money than we've allocated, can we have a vote at one of our meetings to off-cycle request it basically for admin? can't quite picture why that would be necessary, but let's say for some reason you have to hire somebody unexpectedly.
So the admin, the budget that we set for admin at the beginning of the year, it it goes up to a maximum of 5%, but anytime before December, you could vote to move money out of um the budgeted reserve into the admin. I think. I think that you could make a change, or you could, if we receive more funding than was available, it may be possible. If we receive more funding than was estimated at the beginning of the year, it could be possible to add additional funding into the administrative bucket out of that. But there's a very tricky timeline in which that has to take place, which we've not been able to meet most years because it doesn't align with all of our schedules. But maybe it would be helpful for me to be a little bit more specific about what areas I anticipate the admin budget could increase. And I could, if you wanted, quickly do a little bit of research and pull out what are the amounts that we actually spent in each of the categories that the admin pays for over the past year. But we anticipate perhaps using some of the admin money to cover staffing in the housing division where the loss of revenue from other sources may potentially result in a contraction of staff capacity in the housing division, or the contraction of ability to fund projects. We can potentially use CPA admin to make more capacity available for the housing division. I anticipate we ran into several big questions that emerged over the last year over historic preservation restrictions and the types of conditions that we place on historic preservation projects. And so I'm anticipating perhaps commissioning a consultant to help us to unravel and sort out what to do in the area of historic preservation restrictions and conditions on projects. So those, I think that, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to, so that was interesting what you just said about the admin funds helping to staff affordable housing services. Because just so the committee knows, the grants cannot be used for staff. They can be used for professional services like an architect or, something like that, but they can't be used for admin. So that's kind of an interesting wrinkle that I hadn't even conceived of. But also for the sake of the committee's knowledge, these are just recommendations. So these have to go to the city council and then they get approved by city council.
Yeah.
And on top of that, whenever we move funds around, it's a recommendation that goes to city council and they approve it and move it around. So just to remember, there's an extra step. We're not the end of the line.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to be a little bit more specific about housing staffing, would be specifically my counterpart in the Affordable Housing Trust. So the staff person who administers the funding that is granted by the Affordable Housing Trust for construction and housing programs. So um, it, it would not be, 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 it wo it wouldn't just be staffing for the housing division in general.
Helpful.
So if we wanted to make maybe a less grandiose suggestion of shifting priorities, we don't have to think in round 5%. We could always chip away admin to 4% and cut
Yeah.
our budget reserve down to 8% or something and make 53 in affordable housing, just to kind of express that those are, shifting goals, understanding that it will ultimately be kind of tailored to each year's needs.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, Eric, and something I'm holding in my head. I mean, the math is obvious, but 1% of the budget is $72,000, right? So as we cleave off of a percentage here or there, it's 72K. We're moving an allocation. Entire 5% would be whatever that is, 350,000. So that's just the difference between, for community housing reserve, for example, 50% versus 55%. It's a $350,000 difference. So definitely not nothing, for sure not nothing, but within the grand scheme, not a massive change to our allocation. So that's where I'm with you, Eric. I think we don't have to stick to the round numbers. And to me, that 4% number on admin seems like a reasonable number based on what we've heard. To me, 6% for budgeted reserve feels a little bit low, but I understand we can't have everything. I don't know what we have right there is not shocking to me, but anybody with thoughts about that split that Roberta's showing right now?
I think if we wanted to have a 10% budgeted reserve, I don't think it would also be too out of the question to take 2% from both open space and historic preservation. Get budgeted reserve to 10%, knowing that that could be redistributed into either of those two
Yeah.
items.
That's true. It's ultimately sort of a shell game in a way, because it go one place but come right back again. And
Yeah.
Mhm. Knowing that we still want to fund different city projects and different historic preservation projects in the city, as well as open space, and not kind of favoring one or the other, but just kind of equally reducing them both seems fair in my mind. Because in the end, we're still like open space and historic preservation is still getting much more than it had last year.
Yeah.
Roberta, can you remind me, based on how the rules are written for CPA and CPC, what is the lowest percentage any one category can have? Is it 10%? Was that what it was? Yeah. So the only thing I'm worried about, I like this balancing and chipping away percentage at a time and keeping the reserve sort of level, with the percentage from the before. But the 13% on historic preservation just feels a lot closer to the 10. There's no easy answer on this, because as we grow one thing, we're chipping away at the other. But I guess maybe with 10% in the budgeted reserve, that does feel like that could be given in part back to historic preservation if a project warranted.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, totally agree. Good point, Richard.
yeah, as the historic commission representative, that I'm the one that would be obligated to take that most personally, and knowing that it's afflicting others, it's not like just being singled out. And I know how we are. We're sort of committed to making a best effort to fund everything. So it's never like we respond to the needs. And like I said earlier, I've in my little time here, I've seen it. Some years it's like a huge historic preservation intense thing. We had the city hall roof off cycle thing. And so I think that preserves the spirit of this, which is that 10% could easily go all in one way or another. And we are getting a lot more money this year anyway. So
yeah,
I think we're settling on something that could work for me.
All right, thanks, Eric. Anybody else with feelings about this mix?
I'm willing to make the motion to proceed as presented.
All right. I'm willing to entertain that. I think if no further comment, I'd welcome a second if anybody feels so inclined.
Second.
All right.
All right, I
Roberta.
will stop sharing and call the roll. Mary Jo,
Aye.
Heather,
Aye.
Eric,
I was muted. Yes, sorry. Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Michael,
Aye.
and Joe.
Yes.
Great, the motion passes and we have the budget set for this year. Thank you all very much for that very, very deliberately thought out decision.
Thank you.
And reviewing the agenda again, the last item would be approval of the final CPA plan so that I can release that to the public. I don't think this needs a formal vote, but I would take any final feedback that you all have to incorporate into any changes into the plan.
I think it's a really, really beautiful report. If those maps are needing any updating, let's do that. And then I think it can be released.
Great. Thanks for the reminder. And I think that covers everything that we had to cover this meeting. I just want to take a quick look before we go at the I did include in the meeting packet a few project status reports that had been missing last month. That's just for your information. There's not really any discussion that we need to have about those. The CPC calendar, just looking ahead at what we have in the coming months. In June, we're due to have the Affordable Housing Trust present the annual report. I hope that they'll be ready to do that. To be quite honest, my counterpart, Paul Goldstein, has left, and they're in the process of hiring his replacement. So I will not be surprised if they beg us to wait another month before they come to present their annual report. But we also needed to begin to look at the committee terms so that we know whose terms are expiring at the end of this year and what will be the process for recruiting new committee members to take their place next year. And I should have pulled up the link ahead of time, and I apologize. I will email everyone afterward. The city of Somerville was awarded an award for historic preservation for the Prospect Hill Park renovation that was CPA funded a few years ago. And Prospect Hill Park is also nominated for a People's Choice Award. And you and your friends are the people. So I would encourage everyone to click on the link and vote for your favorite project to win the People's Choice Award for Historic Preservation. So I'll follow up with an email about that tomorrow.
What does the winner get aside from prestige?
A plaque?
Millions of dollars. Yeah.
I wish. Roberta, can I also make a quick plug? We haven't finalized the dates yet for the ribbon cutting of Ken Kelly Park located on the corner of Somerville Ave and Rossmore Street. It might be before our next CPC meeting or the week of our CPC meeting or the following week after, but that project is almost complete, and then we're going to have a ribbon cutting. The CPC gave us all of the funds for the design of it. So it's a very exciting park that we're about to open, kind of in the corner of East Union Square. So lovely little space.
Thank
But I'll
you.
be sure to send all the information to Roberta for her to distribute once we know what day the ribbon cutting is.
That'd be
Thanks.
great.
And can you remind me, John, was that also an ARPA funded project?
It was not ARPA, CDBG, CPA for the design, and then just general funds and a parkland acquisition grant, which I'm racing to finish before the end of the week.
Mhm.
Nice. It looks great, John. Really excited about it. So
Thank you.
would love to attend. Yeah.
Contractors and designers have worked very hard on this, and it's looking phenomenal. Yeah.
Very
Thank you.
cool. All right. Anything else, Roberta?
That is all for this evening.
Excellent. If nothing else from anybody else, anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion. I haven't done anything.
I can
A
second that.
second. All right. Roberta,
I
please
didn't hear who seconded it.
Was me.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. All right, and so I'll call the roll. Mary Jo,
Aye.
Heather,
Aye.
Eric,
No, oh, I'm just kidding. Yes, yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Michael,
Aye.
and Joe.
Yes.
All right, thank you all very much.
Thanks,
Have a good
all.
evening.
Yep, see you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Take care.
Take care.